The first thing I saw when I walked through the door wasn't my mother's face or my father's disappointed sigh. It was a mountain of cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly in the foyer, sealed with cheap packing tape. My name was scrawled on the side of each one in my mother's looping, passive aggressive cursive. For a heart stopping moment, I thought someone had died. Then I saw it. My favorite worn out reading chair, the one with the permanent indent of my body, perched precariously atop the pile like a sad, upholstered king deposed from his throne. A floorboard creaked above me. I looked up towards the landing, and there she was, my cousin Chloe. She leaned against the doorway of my bedroom, a smug little smile playing on her perfectly glossed lips. She was wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before, one that cost more than my entire textbook budget for the semester. The walls behind her weren't the soft, dreamy lilac I had painstakingly painted 3 summers ago. They were a violent, nauseating shade of flamingo pink. "Oh, Ilara!" she cooed, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "You're back." Awkward. My parents appeared behind her, my mother wringing her hands, my father staring at a spot on the wall just over my head. It was his signature move, the one he used when he'd decided on a course of action and didn't want to be swayed by the emotional fallout. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My backpack, heavy with a semester's worth of books and a single hard-won A-, suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Now don't make a scene," my mother began, already on the defensive. "Your Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark, they've fallen on some hard times. Chloe needed a place to stay, a stable environment." "A stable environment," I repeated, incredulous. "What about my environment? This is my room." "Was your room," Chloe corrected, examining her manicure with theatrical boredom. "It's mine now. It has much better light for my influencing videos." My father finally spoke, his voice flat and final. "You're at college most of the year, Alara. It didn't make sense for a perfectly good room to sit empty. We put your things in the basement. You can use the pull-out couch down there when you're home for holidays." The basement. The cold, damp, spider-infested space with the single high window that let in slivers of gray light. The place where forgotten things went to decay. They hadn't just given away my room, they had demoted me, relegated me to the forgotten memories of the house. I looked from my father's stony expression to my mother's pleading, guilt-ridden eyes, and finally to Chloe's triumphant smirk. This wasn't about need. This was about preference. It had always been about preference. They were replacing me, erasing the last physical space that was truly mine. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. A strange, cold calm washed over me. I dropped my backpack, the thud echoing in the sudden silence. I walked past them, not even gracing them with a glance, and descended the rickety wooden stairs to the basement. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and dust. And there it was. My life, disassembled and packed away like a holiday decoration. My books, my clothes, my art supplies, my entire existence, boxed and labeled. In the corner, next to the hulking ancient furnace, was my old desk. And on it, my laptop. It was an outdated model, slow and clunky, but it was mine. I sank onto the dusty, moth-eaten sofa, the springs groaning in protest. I pulled the laptop towards me and opened it. The screen flickered to life, illuminating my face in the gloom. They thought this was a punishment. They thought they were putting me in my place, burying me in the foundations of the house they never felt I truly belonged in. They had no idea. They hadn't buried me. They had planted a seed in the dark, and they had just given me all the time and isolation I needed to grow. Inside this clunky plastic shell was my real world. A world I was building from scratch, one line of code at a time. A world they couldn't touch, couldn't criticize, couldn't give away to their favorite. A world that was about to become my weapon. And as I stared at the glowing screen, a single, resolute thought took root in my mind. They would regret this. I wouldn't just leave this house. I would come back and own it. My entire life had been a masterclass in being the lesser-loved child. It wasn't loud, screaming abuse. It was a quiet, persistent erosion of self. A constant, draining exercise in comparison. Chloe wasn't just my cousin. She was the daughter my mother, Brenda, had always wished for. Where I was quiet and bookish, Chloe was bubbly and social. Where I had mousy brown hair and a tendency to blend into the wallpaper, Chloe was a pocket-sized blonde bombshell who commanded attention the moment she entered a room. From the time we were children, the disparity was a living, breathing thing in our family. My A on a difficult physics exam would be met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear," while Chloe's participation trophy from a local dance recital would be framed and mounted in the living room. My birthdays were quiet affairs, a grocery store cake, and a sensible gift like socks or a new calculator. Chloe's were extravagant themed parties that my parents would take out loans to finance, complete with pony rides, professional magicians, and mountains of presents she'd discard within a week. My father, Richard, was a man governed by the principle of least resistance. He craved a quiet, uncomplicated life, and I, with my moody silences and overly sensitive nature, was a complication. Chloe was easy. She flattered him, laughed at his terrible jokes, and never challenged his authority. So he followed my mother's lead, lavishing praise and resources on Chloe, while offering me a kind of benign neglect that stung worse than outright cruelty. They'd borrow money from the savings account I meticulously fed with my part-time library job, money I was saving for a proper computer, to fund Chloe's latest whim: a pageant entry fee, a new designer handbag, a weekend trip with her friends. When I'd protest, my mother would sigh and say, "Alara, don't be so selfish. Family helps family. Besides, what do you need all that money for? You just sit in your room all day." That room was my sanctuary. It was the one place where the carefully constructed hierarchy of our family seemed to fade away. It was filled with secondhand books, posters of distant galaxies, and sketches of fantasy worlds. And in the center of it all was my computer, a machine I had cobbled together from salvaged parts and birthday money I'd managed to hide. It was my portal to a universe where I wasn't the disappointing daughter. I was a creator. I stumbled into coding by accident. I wanted to build a website to showcase my digital art, and I was too broke to hire anyone. So I started teaching myself HTML from free tutorials, then CSS, then JavaScript. The logic of it, the way simple commands could build intricate functional systems, captivated me. It was like learning a secret language, one that could build worlds out of nothing. I spent every spare moment I had learning, practicing, creating. While my family was downstairs watching television or fawning over Chloe, I was in my room, bathed in the glow of the monitor, exploring the limitless possibilities of code. My passion project, the one I poured all my secret hopes and frustrations into, was a video game. It was a simple, atmospheric exploration game called Echoes of the Deep. The player controlled a lone diver exploring a vast, sunken city, uncovering the story of a lost civilization through environmental clues and fragmented texts. It was quiet, melancholic, and deeply personal. The game was a metaphor for my life, a solitary figure searching for meaning in a world that had forgotten her. My family, of course, dismissed it as another one of my weird hobbies. Once, Chloe burst into my room without knocking, saw me typing furiously, and sneered, "What are you doing, hacking the government?" She'd reported back to my parents that I was wasting my life on that stupid computer, and my father had threatened to take it away if my grades slipped even a little. The threat was a blade held perpetually at my neck, forcing me to be a perfect student by day and a secret developer by night. My only support came from the internet. I joined online forums for indie game developers, sharing screenshots of my work and asking for advice. That's where I met Silas. His username was Pixel Prophet, and he was a legend in the community, a retired developer from the golden age of 90s gaming. He saw a post I made showcasing the water physics I'd programmed for Echoes of the Deep. He sent me a private message. "Kid," it read, "this is seriously impressive stuff. The particle effects, the lighting, you have a real gift. Who taught you?" I told him the truth. No one. Just the internet. From that day on, Silas became my mentor. He never asked for my real name or my age. He only cared about the work. He'd critique my code, suggest improvements, and, most importantly, he treated me like a peer. He saw the potential in me that my own family refused to acknowledge. He was the first person who ever made me feel like my passion wasn't a waste of time. He was the one who told me, "This game isn't just a hobby, kid. This could be your ticket out." I'd always thought of it as an escape. He was the one who made me see it could be a weapon. Sitting in that damp basement, the smell of my mother's bleach and disappointment potpourri drifting down the stairs, Silas's words echoed in my head. Your ticket out. They had taken my room, my last physical anchor in that house. They had pushed me out, confident I had nowhere else to go. The irony was, by shoving me into this subterranean prison, they had severed my last sentimental tie to them. I no longer felt the dull ache of wanting their approval. It had been replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I needed to finish my game. And then, I needed to make them pay. The decision settled over me, not with anger, but with the serene clarity of a mathematical proof. They understood the language of money, status, and power. It was time I became fluent. The first few weeks in the basement were a trial by fire. The Wi-Fi signal was weak and unreliable, flickering in and out like a dying star. I had to position my laptop at a specific, awkward angle on a stack of old encyclopedias to catch a stable connection. The cold seeped into my bones, and I often worked wrapped in a musty old blanket, my fingers stiff and slow on the keyboard. Above me, I could hear the sounds of the life I was excluded from, the cheerful rhythm of Chloe's pop music, the laughter from the television, the clinking of dinner plates I wasn't invited to share. They'd often forget to call me up for meals, leaving me to subsist on granola bars and tap water. It was a calculated, cruel form of neglect. They wanted to make me so miserable that I would either break down and beg for their forgiveness for a crime I hadn't committed, or simply disappear. They underestimated me. Every muffled laugh from upstairs, every time Chloe would stomp on the floor above my head just to be annoying, it wasn't a distraction, it was fuel. It sharpened my focus, hardened my resolve. I poured every ounce of that bitterness and rage into my work. I coded for 16, sometimes 18 hours a day, sleeping in short, dreamless bursts on the lumpy pullout, my cheek pressed against the musty cushions. The turning point came one evening about a month into my exile. I overheard my parents arguing in the kitchen, their voices carrying clearly through the heating vent near my desk. "The payment is due on Friday, Richard," my mother said, her voice tight with anxiety. "The interest rate on the second mortgage went up again. I don't know how we're going to cover it, and Chloe's car payment." "Don't worry, Brenda," my father replied, his tone falsely confident. "Chloe's new influencing gig is about to take off. That brand partnership she's been talking about will cover it all. She's a star. It's a sure thing." I froze. A second mortgage? Chloe's car payment? I did some discreet digging. It wasn't hard. My father, in his infinite carelessness, left a pile of mail on the hall table. Tucked between a credit card offer and a coupon booklet was a letter from the bank. I snatched it and took it down to the basement. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read it. They had taken out a massive loan against the house that had been in our family for 3 generations, to fund Chloe's career as a lifestyle influencer. They'd bought her a luxury car, a new wardrobe, and top-of-the-line camera equipment, all on borrowed money, secured by the very roof over our heads. And based on the letter, they were already behind on the payments. They weren't just irresponsible, they were reckless. They were gambling my heritage on Chloe's vapid, narcissistic dreams. That was it. The last flicker of familial duty I felt died in that dusty basement. This wasn't just my home they were disrespecting anymore. It was my grandparents' legacy. A new plan began to form, grander and more deliciously ironic than simply getting rich and leaving. I messaged Silas. "The game is 95% done, but I need to accelerate the timeline. I'm ready to launch." His reply came almost instantly. "Oh, what's the hurry, kid? Don't rush the final polish." "It's personal," I typed. "I have a deadline." I explained my new goal, not just to move out, but to buy the house, to take back the one thing they valued more than me and turn it into a symbol of my victory. Silas was quiet for a long moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head thousands of miles away. "It's a bold plan," he finally wrote. "Poetic even. But to do that, You're not just going to need profits from the game, you're going to need capital. You'll need to look like a serious buyer. You'll need a corporation. So, let's form one, I replied, my fingers flying across the keys. It takes money to do that, he cautioned. Lawyers, filing fees, setting up accounts. It's not cheap. I have some saved, I lied. My parents had drained my savings months ago. Keep it, he wrote. You'll need it for ramen. Consider this an advance on your future millions. I'll front the seed money for the incorporation and the initial marketing push. You just focus on finishing the best damn game this world has ever seen. I'll handle the business side. We'll set up a shell corporation. Your name won't be on anything publicly. You'll be a ghost. A wave of gratitude so intense, it made my eyes sting washed over me. This grizzled, anonymous stranger on the internet had more faith in me and was willing to invest more in me than my own parents. Thank you, Silas, I typed. I won't let you down. I know you won't, he replied. Now get to work. You've got a house to buy. With renewed purpose, I plunged back into the code. The final 5% of the game was a blur of caffeine-fueled all-nighters. I polished every texture, balanced every sound effect, and squashed every bug I could find. 2 weeks later, I sent the final build to Silas. It's done, I wrote. Echoes of the Deep is ready to set sail. The day we launched Echoes of the Deep, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. We released it quietly on a major indie gaming platform with a modest price tag and a simple, intriguing description. Silas used the seed money to place a few targeted ads on gaming blogs and forums. For the first few days, the sales were a trickle. A few dozen copies here, 100 there. It was more money than I'd ever had in my life, but it was a pittance compared to the cost of a house. I felt a pang of despair. Had I been foolish? Had I aimed too high? Then, on the 4th day, the earthquake hit. A streamer by the name of Captain Cortex, who had millions of followers, discovered the game. He was known for his love of atmospheric, story-driven indie titles. He started a live stream, and for 6 hours he played Echoes of the Deep, his audience utterly captivated. He praised the art style, the haunting soundtrack, the subtle, emotional storytelling. He called it a hidden masterpiece. The effect was instantaneous. It was like a dam breaking. Sales didn't just climb, they skyrocketed. The game shot to the top of the bestseller charts, displacing titles from multi-million-dollar studios. My laptop, which was my only window to this new reality, was flooded with notifications. Positive reviews poured in, fan art started appearing on social media, people were talking about the mystery developer behind the game, speculating about who could have created something so beautiful. Down in my basement dungeon, I watched the numbers on my sales dashboard climb at a dizzying rate. $10,000, $50,000, $100,000. Within a week, we had cleared $1 million in sales. It felt completely unreal. I was a millionaire, and my parents upstairs were complaining about the cost of gourmet coffee pods for Chloe. Silas was ecstatic. I knew it, kid. I knew you had it in you. He messaged me. The money is being funneled to the corporation's bank account. You are now the sole anonymous owner of Deep Blue Studios, LLC. While my virtual world exploded with success, my physical one remained unchanged. I was still the forgotten basement dweller. One evening, Chloe came downstairs, not to taunt me, but to complain. Mom and Dad are being so annoying, she whined, flopping onto the edge of my pull-out couch and wrinkling her nose at the musty smell. They're stressing about money again. It's so tacky. Dad said we might have to sell the house if my new brand deal doesn't come through. I looked up from my laptop, my face a mask of neutrality. Oh, that's too bad, I said, my voice flat. Inside, my heart was doing a victory lap. Her brand deal, I knew from her loud phone calls, was with a shady diet tea company and was already falling apart. My plan was no longer a distant dream. It was a rapidly approaching reality. Phase 2 began. On Silas's advice, I hired a shark of a lawyer, a woman named Miss Davenport who specialized in discreet corporate acquisitions. I explained the situation to her over a secure video call, my face obscured by shadow. She didn't flinch. So, to summarize, she said, her voice crisp and professional. You want your company, Deep Blue Studios, to acquire the mortgage debt on your parents' property, and then, when they inevitably default, purchase the house in a private sale. Am I correct? Yes, I confirmed. A slow smile spread across her face. I like your style, kid. Consider it done. Miss Davenport was brutally efficient. She discovered that my parents' second mortgage, the one they were struggling with, had been bundled and sold to a larger investment firm. That firm, facing its own financial pressures, was looking to offload some of its riskier debt portfolios. Deep Blue Studios, flush with cash and looking for stable assets, made an offer they couldn't refuse. For a fraction of my game's profits, I bought my parents' debt. They now owed their monthly mortgage payment to me, and they had no idea. Phase 3 was the squeeze. As the new lien holder, I had the legal right to enforce the terms of their loan. And their loan had a variable interest rate. Through Miss Davenport, I sent the official notification. Their interest rate was being adjusted to the maximum allowable limit. Their monthly payment tripled overnight. The panic upstairs was palpable. The arguments grew louder, more frequent, more desperate. I heard my father on the phone begging the bank for forbearance, not realizing he was essentially talking to a shell corporation that I controlled. I heard my mother weeping, lamenting how they were going to lose everything. I heard Chloe screaming that it wasn't her fault, that they were the ones who were supposed to support her dreams. It took them 2 months to accept the inevitable. A for sale sign went up on the lawn. It was a beautiful sign, a professionally photographed image of the house I grew up in, the house that held nothing but painful memories. To everyone else, it was a tragedy. To me, it looked like a trophy. They were desperate for a quick sale. They listed it for less than it was worth, hoping to attract a cash buyer who wouldn't haggle. Miss Davenport waited exactly 1 week, letting them sweat. Then she submitted an offer from a numbered holding company, another layer of anonymity. The offer was all cash, no inspections, with a 30-day closing. It was 10% below their already low asking price. I listened through the vents as they debated it. "It's too low," my mother cried. "After we pay off the mortgages and the fees, there will be barely anything left." "What choice do we have, Brenda?" My father shot back, his voice ragged with stress. "It's this or foreclosure. This company is our only shot." They accepted the offer. The closing date was set. For the next 30 days, I lived in the basement, a ghost in the machine of my own revenge, listening to them pack up the life they had built on my neglect. They boxed up Chloe's gaudy furniture, her mountains of clothes, her framed photos of herself. They packed away the family heirlooms they had deemed me unworthy of inheriting. They were systematically dismantling their own lives, and I was the architect of it all, watching from the shadows. The final day, moving day, was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. The sky was a brilliant, unforgiving blue, the kind of cheerful weather that felt like a personal insult during a tragedy. 2 massive moving trucks were parked in the driveway, their open maws swallowing the contents of my childhood home. My father, Richard, was directing the movers with a forced, blustery authority that couldn't quite mask the slump in his shoulders. My mother, Brenda, stood on the porch, her face pale and drawn, clutching a box of knickknacks as if it were a life raft. And Chloe, my dear cousin Chloe, was sitting on the front steps, scrolling through her phone and complaining loudly about the lack of Wi-Fi. I had spent the morning at a salon. I had my hair professionally styled, my makeup done, and I had used a sliver of my newfound fortune on an outfit that cost more than their monthly mortgage payment used to. It was a dark green power suit, tailored to perfection, paired with sharp, unapologetic heels. When I pulled up to the curb, not in my old, sputtering sedan, but in a brand new, gleaming black Tesla, the silence was immediate and profound. The movers paused, boxes in hand. My father's jaw went slack. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief. Chloe looked up from her phone, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shooting into her hairline. I got out of the car, the driver's side door closing with a soft, expensive thud. I walked slowly up the driveway, the click-clack of my heels on the pavement the only sound. "Ilara," my mother breathed, her voice a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "What are you doing here? We're a little busy." "I can see that," I said, my voice calm and even. I let my eyes drift over the chaos, the exposed bones of their lives being loaded into trucks. "It looks like you're moving." "Well, of course we're moving," my father snapped, recovering some of his bluster. Thanks to the bank. What do you want? Did you come here to say, I told you so? No, I said, stopping directly in front of him. I reached into my designer handbag and pulled out a small, elegant leather pouch. I came to do this. I opened the pouch and produced a single shiny brass key. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger. Chloe scoffed from the steps. What's that supposed to be? The key to your new, sad little apartment? Don't let the door hit you on the way out. I smiled, a real smile this time, but it didn't reach my eyes. Not quite. This is the key to this house. A thick, uncomprehending silence descended. My father stared at the key as if it were a venomous snake. What are you talking about? The numbered holding company that put in the cash offer? I explained, my voice as crisp and clear as Miss Davenport's. The one that bought this house out from under you? That was my company. The color drained from my father's face. My mother swayed on her feet, one hand flying to her mouth. Chloe just stared, her own face a mask of horrified confusion. That's not possible, my father stammered. You don't have that kind of money. You're a college student. I was a college student, I corrected him gently. Now, I'm the owner of Deep Blue Studios. You might have heard of our first release. It's a little game called Echoes of the Deep. It's done rather well, all that time I was wasting on my silly little hobby in my room, and later in the basement you so graciously provided. I was building an empire you never saw because you never bothered to look. I let the words hang in the air, each one a perfectly aimed dart. I saw the years of neglect, of dismissal, of casual cruelty flash in their eyes as the truth began to dawn. They weren't the victims of a faceless bank or bad luck. They were the victims of their own prejudice. They had been checkmated by the pawn they had sacrificed without a second thought. I turned my attention to Chloe, who was now standing, her phone forgotten on the steps. She looked from me to her parents, her mind clearly struggling to process the monumental shift in power. Her smugness had vanished, replaced by a dawning, panicked terror. You, she whispered, you did this to us. No, I said, taking a step towards her. You did this to yourselves. You decided my space, my home, my entire existence was disposable. You gave my room to your precious Chloe, so I decided to buy the whole house. I walked past her, up the steps, and unlocked the front door with my new key. I turned back to face them, framed in the doorway of what was now my house. The movers are on my clock now, I announced. They will be taking all of your belongings and putting them into a storage unit. The first month is prepaid. After that, it's your problem. My parents were speechless, their faces a mottled mess of rage, shame, and disbelief. They were homeless, and their estranged, neglected daughter was their landlord. What about me? Chloe cried, her voice cracking. Where am I supposed to go? I feigned a look of thoughtful consideration. You know, I said, tapping a finger to my chin, that's a good question. You seem to love my old room so much. You went to so much trouble redecorating it in that unique shade of pink. I reached back into my handbag and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. I unfolded it. It was a formal lease agreement. I tell you what, I said, my voice sweet as poison. You can stay. You can keep the room as my tenant. I held the lease out to her. Rent is $2,000 a month, due on the 1st in cash. Utilities are not included. There's a strict no guests after 10 p.m. policy, no loud music. And I'll be conducting monthly inspections. Of course, there's a hefty security deposit. Sign here. Chloe stared at the document as if I had handed her a lit stick of dynamite. $2,000 was an impossible sum for her. She had no job, no skills beyond taking selfies, and no one left to bankroll her parasitic lifestyle. My parents watched powerless as their golden child, their sure thing, was brought to her knees. This was the true revenge. It wasn't just taking the house. It was dismantling the entire family hierarchy and rewriting it with me at the very top. It was making Chloe utterly, completely dependent on my mercy, and I had none left to give. Welcome home, cousin, I said with a final, chillingly bright smile. I have a feeling we're going to be very happy here. 6 months later, the house was transformed. The flamingo pink of my old room, now officially designated the tenant's room, had been painted over with a cool, sophisticated charcoal gray. The rest of the house had been gutted and renovated, a minimalist masterpiece of clean lines, polished concrete floors, and smart home technology. My parents' heavy, dark furniture was gone, replaced by pieces that were light and modern. The house breathed now. It was no longer suffocated by their bad taste and bitter memories. I had exorcised their ghosts. I ran Deep Blue Studios from a custom-built office that used to be my parents' master bedroom. We had 2 new games in development, and I had hired a small, brilliant team of developers who worked remotely. Silas had officially joined the company as my chief technical officer, and his wisdom was as invaluable as his friendship. He'd visited once, standing in the middle of the gleaming new living room and letting out a low whistle. "Well, kid," he'd said with a grin, "you really did it. You bought the whole damn castle." It felt good. It felt earned. I was at peace, a feeling so foreign it was almost jarring. My life was finally, unequivocally, my own. My victory was total, but the spoils were quiet. I found joy not in lavish spending, but in simple freedoms, buying whatever books I wanted, ordering takeout without checking my bank account first, sleeping soundly through the night without the fear of a condescending remark or a quiet act of sabotage waiting for me in the morning. My antagonists, on the other hand, were living in a hell of their own making. My parents had ended up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment across town, in a complex with peeling paint and a lingering smell of boiled cabbage in the hallways. Their social standing had evaporated. The friends who had once admired their beautiful home and charming daughter, Chloe, of course, now avoided their calls. The story of how their quiet, nerdy daughter had bought their house out from under them had become a piece of local gossip, a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties. They were a laughingstock. They tried, of course. At first, it was angry, demanding voicemails left on a number I no longer used. Then came the wheedling texts, filled with half-hearted apologies and thinly veiled requests for money. The last I heard, my father was working as a greeter at a big box store, his pride a tattered relic of a former life. My mother had taken to writing long, rambling emails detailing her regrets. But they were always focused on what they had lost: the house, the money, their reputation, and never on what they had done to me. I archived them all without replying. And Chloe? Chloe was my masterpiece. She was trapped. She signed the lease, having no other option. She tried to find a job, but she had no resume and no skills. She was forced to take a humiliating position as a waitress at a diner, where the grease-stained uniform clashed horribly with her influencer aesthetic. She was always late with the rent. Each month, I would post a formal, legally worded late notice on her door. I never spoke to her, never acknowledged her presence in the house beyond our landlord-tenant relationship. I was a silent, omnipresent force in her life. The rules of the lease were enforced with cold, ruthless efficiency. Her music was too loud, a formal warning, an unauthorized guest, a fine deducted from her security deposit. Her social media presence withered and died. It was hard to project a glamorous, carefree lifestyle when her followers caught glimpses of her drab waitress uniform or the stark, impersonal room she now lived in. She was a bird in a gilded cage, only the cage wasn't gilded anymore. It was just a cage. One evening, I was working late in my office when I heard a soft knock on the door. It was Chloe. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her usual mask of makeup gone, revealing a pale, blotchy face I hardly recognized. "What is it, Chloe?" I asked, not bothering to invite her in. "The rent isn't due for another week." "That's not it," she mumbled, looking at the floor. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." I waited, saying nothing. "For everything," she continued, her voice thick. "For the room. For how I treated you. You were right. We were awful. I was awful." I looked at her, this broken, diminished version of the girl who had lorded her privilege over me her entire life. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, not even the satisfaction I thought I would. Her apology was like the late payment notices, too little, too late, and ultimately irrelevant. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for where she had ended up. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. She flinched as if I had slapped her. She nodded mutely, turned, and walked back down the hall to her room. That was the last time she ever tried to speak to me about the past. Our relationship, if you could call it that, reverted to its cold, transactional nature. Her apology didn't fix anything, nor was it meant to. It was just another consequence, the final, pathetic whimper of a defeated enemy. Justice had been served. The accounts were balanced, and I, in the quiet solitude of my beautiful, peaceful house, was finally free.